The child's scream tore through the cargo bay before anyone could stop her. Captain Reese Keller froze mid-step, his hand halfway to the plasma cutter on his belt. The sound shouldn't have existed here, not in the abandoned section of Outpost Meridian where nothing had lived for 3 standard years. His crew scattered behind him, weapons drawn, scanning the shadows between stacked containers and forgotten equipment. The second scream came sharper, more desperate, and unmistakably young. "Sir, that's human," Lieutenant Shaw whispered, her rifle trembling slightly. "No colonist children were reported missing." Reese moved forward anyway, each footfall deliberate on the metal grating. The bay stretched before them like a graveyard of failed ambitions, half the lights dead, oxygen recyclers humming their lonely song. They'd come to salvage parts, nothing more. The outpost had been evacuated after the Vythe invasion pushed through this sector, everyone rescued or lost. No one stayed behind. No one could. The child appeared between 2 supply crates, maybe 7 years old, her jumpsuit torn and filthy. She clutched something against her chest, something that glowed faintly blue in the darkness. Her eyes were wide with terror and something else, something protective. "Easy," Reese said, holstering his weapon and crouching low. "We're human. We're here to help." She shook her head violently. "You can't take me. You can't take her." "Her." Reese felt his stomach drop. Shaw moved closer, her scanner beeping frantically. The readings made no sense, biological signatures that shouldn't exist, energy patterns that belong to only one species in known space. The child stepped back, and her arms shifted, revealing what she'd been hiding. The Vythe infant was barely the size of a house cat, its chitinous plates still soft and translucent, its 4 eyes blinking slowly in the light from their helmets. Its breathing came in rapid, shallow gasps, and even Reese, who'd fought Vythe soldiers across 6 systems, could see it was dying. "Contact," Shaw said flatly. "Sir, that's a Vythe juvenile. Protocol requires immediate." "I know the protocol." Reese cut her off, his voice harder than intended. He'd read the reports, seen the images from colonies where Vythe queens had laid their eggs in human infrastructure, using civilians as incubation hosts and first meals. The species didn't negotiate, didn't show mercy, didn't recognize sentience in anything but themselves. Earth Command's orders were absolute: destroy on sight, no exceptions, no hesitation. The child clutched the alien tighter. "She's sick. She needs medicine. I found her alone, and she was crying, and I couldn't leave her, I couldn't." "What's your name?" Reese asked, forcing his voice gentle despite the alarm screaming in his head. "Mira. Mira Chin." Her chin lifted with defiance that seemed too large for her small frame. "My parents were engineers here. When the evacuation happened, the tunnels collapsed. I was in the lower levels. I survived on emergency rations. I was alone for so long." Shaw's scanner beeped again, more insistent. "Sir, that juvenile is emitting distress signals. If there are other Vythe in range, there aren't." Mira interrupted. "I checked everywhere. She's the only one. Her egg was damaged in the fighting, and her mother never came back. She's all alone, just like I was." Reese studied the child's face, seeing the haunted look of someone who'd survived something no one should. He'd seen that look before, in mirrors and in the eyes of soldiers who'd watched their units die. The Vythe infant shifted weakly in Myra's arms, its mandibles clicking in a pattern that sounded almost like whimpering. "Captain," Shaw said quietly, stepping beside him, "we have to follow procedure. You know what these things become. You've seen the bodies." He had. Vythe warriors stood 8 feet tall, could tear through combat armor with their claws, and fought with a coordination that suggested hive-mind intelligence. They'd glassed 3 human colonies before Earth's fleets pushed them back. The war had cost billions of lives. This creature in Myra's arms would grow into one of them, instinct and biology driving it to kill, to conquer, to consume. But right now it was small and dying, and a child who'd survived impossible odds was begging him not to be a monster. "How long has she been with you?" Reese asked. 40 days. Maybe 45. I lost count. Myra's voice cracked. She doesn't eat meat. I tried giving her rations at first, but she got sick. She eats the algae from the recyclers, and the fungus growing in the dark sections. She's never tried to hurt me. Not once. Shaw made a sound of disbelief, but Reese held up his hand. Herbivorous Vith were theoretically possible but, unconfirmed, dismissed as xenobiological speculation. If true, it changed nothing officially. Command wouldn't care about diet preferences or individual behavior. The genetic code was the threat, the potential for reproduction, the certainty of violence encoded in Vith DNA. The infant's breathing grew more labored, its glow dimming. Myra's tears fell freely now, cutting clean tracks through the grime on her face. Please, she whispered. Don't leave me alone again. Don't make me watch her die when I could have saved her. Reese felt the weight of every decision that had led him here, every compromise between duty and humanity he'd made across 20 years of service. Shaw watched him with a mixture of hope and horror, knowing whatever he chose would define them both. The comm crackled. Captain Keller, this is Meridian Control. We're detecting unusual signals from your location. Report status immediately. His hand moved to the transmitter, but he didn't press the button yet. The child and the alien looked at him with identical expressions of desperate hope, two abandoned souls who'd found each other in the darkness and refused to let go. Everything hung in that moment, balanced on the edge of a decision that would ripple far beyond this forgotten cargo bay. Reese pressed the transmitter. Control, this is Keller. We've found a survivor. Human child, approximately 7 years old. Requesting immediate medical evacuation and psychological support. Confirmed, Captain. Transport inbound, ETA 12 minutes. Any other contacts? His jaw clenched. Shaw stared at him, understanding exactly what he wasn't saying. Mira held her breath, the alien infant trembling against her chest. Negative, Control. Just the survivor. Copy that. Control out. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush them. Shaw opened her mouth, closed it, then slowly lowered her rifle. Sir, I need you to know I'm logging this. Not as insubordination, but as observed fact. That creature could die in the next hour. Reese interrupted. Or could live long enough for us to figure out what the hell it actually is. You saw the readings. Herbivorous biology. No aggressive behavior patterns, distress signals instead of attack pheromones. This doesn't match any Vith profile in our database. That doesn't make it safe. Nothing's safe. We're standing in an abandoned military outpost in hostile space with a traumatized child and a dying alien. Safe stopped being an option the moment we heard that scream. He turned to Mira, his expression softening. I'm going to help you, but I need you to trust me completely. Can you do that? She nodded, though suspicion still clouded her young face. Good. First, we need to get her stabilized. Shaw, do we have any xenobiological medical supplies on the ship? Basic trauma kit, some universal antiseptics, and a portable stasis pod rated for unknown species. It's designed for preserving alien tissue samples, but theoretically, get it. Now. Shaw hesitated only a second before sprinting back toward their docked vessel. Reese knelt beside Mira, examining the infant more closely. Its chitinous plates showed signs of malnutrition, the blue glow that pulsed beneath them flickering erratically. One of its smaller limbs hung at an odd angle, clearly broken and poorly healed. You did good keeping her alive, he said quietly. That took real courage. I named her Arya, Mira whispered. Because she made sounds like singing when I first found her. Before she got too weak. The name struck Reese oddly. Humans named things they loved, things they wanted to protect. The child had bonded with this creature in a way that transcended species, survival instinct, or common sense. Part of him recognized the dangerous naivety in that. Another part, buried under years of military conditioning, remembered being young enough to believe kindness mattered more than fear. Shaw returned with the kit, her face pale. Captain, if Command finds out we're harboring a Vith, they won't. Not yet. Once we're back at the ship, we'll keep Arya in quarantine, run every test we can, and document everything. If she shows any signs of aggression or transformation into military morphology, we deal with it then. But if she doesn't, if there's even a chance we've discovered a non-hostile Vith subspecies, that information is worth more than blind protocol. And if you're wrong? If she's just immature and will turn hostile as she matures? Then, I'll take full responsibility. He met Shaw's eyes steadily. Log my name. Mark this as my call. But give me time to be sure first. Shaw's expression wavered between duty and doubt before she nodded curtly. Together, they worked to transfer Arya into the portable stasis pod, a cylindrical chamber that would slow her metabolism and stabilize her condition. The infant resisted at first, clicking in distress, but Mira stroked her plates gently and whispered reassurances until she calmed. She knows you're trying to help, Mira said, her voice small. She's smart. She understands more than people think. The stasis pod sealed with a soft hiss, its interior filling with oxygenated gel. Arya's glow steadied almost immediately, her breathing evening out. Rhys allowed himself a breath of relief. They had time now, not much, but enough to think. Mira, I need to ask you something important. During the evacuation, did anyone else see Arya? Did you tell anyone about her? No. I was hiding in the maintenance tunnels when the ships left. No one knew I was still here. And I found Arya 3 weeks after that, in one of the collapsed labs. She was just lying there in the broken egg, barely moving. Her voice dropped. I know what people say about the Vith. I saw the broadcasts before the power died. I know I'm supposed to hate them. But she was so small, and she looked at me like I was the only thing in the universe that mattered, and I couldn't just walk away. Rhys felt something crack inside his chest. The child had survived alone for weeks, found a creature everyone told her was a monster, and chose compassion over fear. It was either the bravest or most foolish thing he'd ever witnessed, and he wasn't sure the difference mattered. The transport's engines rumbled overhead, descending toward the outpost's landing pad. Shaw moved to secure the stasis pod while Rhys helped Mira to her feet. She swayed slightly, malnourished and exhausted, but her grip on his arm was fierce. You promise you won't hurt her? She demanded. You promise you'll keep her safe? He wanted to tell her the truth, that he couldn't promise anything, that the universe was cruel and indifferent, and promises shattered as easily as glass. But he looked into her desperate, hopeful eyes and remembered being young enough to need promises to survive. I'll do everything I can, he said. That's the best promise I can give you. It must have been enough because Mira nodded and let him guide her toward the exit. Shaw followed with the stasis pod secured to her pack, her expression unreadable behind her helmet visor. The transport bay doors opened to reveal a standard medical shuttle, its crew ready with thermal blankets and scanning equipment. We've got you now, sweetheart, one of the medics said, reaching for Mira. You're safe. But Mira twisted away, her eyes locked on the stasis pod. Where's she going? I need to stay with her. She's coming with us, Rhys said firmly. Medical quarantine, just like you. We need to make sure you're both healthy. The medic shot him a confused look but didn't question it. They loaded Mira onto a gurney, checking her vitals and murmuring reassurances. Shaw stayed close to the stasis pod, her body language protective despite her earlier objections. Rhys watched it all with a growing sense that he just stepped off a cliff, and had no idea how far the fall would be. As the shuttle lifted off, Meridian Outpost shrinking below them, he pulled up his personal comm and began composing a highly classified message to the only person he trusted with information this dangerous, Admiral Sarah Chin, Xenobiological Research Division, and Myra's grandmother according to the personnel files he'd pulled. The message was simple: found your granddaughter alive. She's not alone. Need your discretion and expertise. This changes everything. He hit send before he could reconsider, watching the encryption protocols scramble the data into untraceable fragments. The die was cast. Now they would see whether compassion could coexist with survival, or whether he just doomed them all for the sake of a child's tears and an alien's silent plea. Shaw dropped into the seat beside him, her voice barely audible over the engines. You know this won't stay quiet, right? Someone will notice. Someone always notices. I know. And when they do, we'll both face court-martial at minimum. Possible execution for treason if command decides harboring a Vyth qualifies as collaboration with the enemy. I know that too. She was quiet for a long moment, then her hand found his shoulder briefly, firmly. Then I guess we better make sure Arya proves she's worth it. Reese looked through the viewport at the stars scattered across the endless black. Somewhere out there, Vyth queens commanded fleets and armies, their species expanding through conquest and consumption. And somewhere on this small shuttle, a herbivorous juvenile with a human name slept in stasis, dreaming whatever dreams aliens dreamed. The war had taught him that survival meant making hard choices, that mercy was a luxury reserved for the victorious. But Mira had survived by choosing kindness in the darkness, by seeing past species and instinct to something more fundamental. If a child could do that, maybe soldiers could learn. Or maybe they'd all die for the mistake. Time would tell. Admiral Sarah Chin arrived 6 hours later, her command shuttle docking with Reese's vessel without ceremony or announcement. She was 73 years old, her hair silver white, and pulled back in the same severe bun she'd worn since her academy days. Her uniform carried enough medals to qualify as armor, each one earned through decisions that had saved millions and damned thousands. Her eyes, though, were what made junior officers nervous, dark and sharp and capable of seeing through excuses like glass. She found Reese in the medical bay, standing outside the quarantine chamber where Mira slept under sedation. The child had crashed hard once the medics assured her Arya was stable, her small body finally surrendering to exhaustion. The stasis pod occupied the adjacent chamber, monitored by equipment that beeped rhythmically. Captain Keller, Chin said, her voice carrying the weight of command without volume. Explain. He did, laying out every detail from the first scream to this moment, leaving nothing sanitized or softened. Chin listened without interruption, her expression revealing nothing. When he finished, silence stretched between them like a blade. You violated Protocol 7, she said finally. The discovery and preservation of hostile xenobiological organisms falls under mandatory destruction orders. No exceptions. No appeals. Yes, ma'am. You falsified a contact report to Meridian Control. Yes, ma'am. You placed your crew, your vessel, and potentially every human in this sector at risk based on the emotional appeal of a traumatized child and an unverified hypothesis about Vyth subspecies. Yes, ma'am. Chin moved to the viewport separating them from Myra's chamber. She studied her granddaughter's sleeping face with an expression Reese couldn't read. I haven't seen her since she was 2 years old. My daughter and I had a disagreement about military service, family duty, the usual generational warfare. She took Mira and her husband to Meridian to prove civilians could build something lasting in contested space. Her voice went flat. I told her she was naive. I told her the outposts would fall. You weren't wrong, Admiral. No. But being right didn't make my daughter survive the tunnel collapse any better. Being right didn't protect my granddaughter from 40 days alone in the dark. She turned to face him. Do you have children, Captain? No, ma'am. Then, you can't understand what it means to fail someone that completely. To know your decisions rippled forward and became someone else's nightmare. She moved to Arya's chamber, studying the creature in stasis. When I got your message, my first instinct was to order an immediate sterilization protocol. Launch this entire medical bay into the nearest star and classify the incident as equipment malfunction. Reese felt his stomach drop. Admiral, I didn't. Do you know why? He shook his head. Because Mira survived 40 days alone and chose to save something instead of just surviving. Because that choice says more about human potential than any battle I've ever commanded. She faced him directly. I've spent 30 years studying the Vyth, Captain. I've dissected their soldiers, analyzed their communications, mapped their hive structures. I know their biology better than most xenobiologists alive. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that every Vith we've encountered operates on predetermined military caste development. Warriors, workers, scouts, queens. No deviation. No variance. No exceptions. Until now, Reese said quietly. Until now. She agreed. This creature shouldn't exist. Herbivorous biology requires completely different gut flora, neural structures optimized for plant identification rather than prey tracking, mandible development inconsistent with tearing flesh. Everything about her violates what we know about Vith evolution. Chen's expression sharpened. Which means either we've been catastrophically wrong about their species, or Arya represents something new. Something possibly engineered or evolved specifically to interact with other species non-violently. Engineered? By who? That's the question that kept me from sterilizing your ship. If the Vith have developed a diplomatic caste, if there's any faction within their species pursuing alternatives to endless warfare, that information is worth any risk. She moved to a data terminal, pulling up genetic analysis results. I had your medical team transmit preliminary scans. Arya's DNA shows markers consistent with deliberate modification. Someone altered her biology before the egg was laid, suppressing aggression hormones and enhancing cognitive flexibility. This wasn't natural evolution, Captain. This was intention. Reese moved beside her, studying the complex genetic maps displayed across multiple screens. A peace offering? Or a spy? Or an experiment? Or a desperate attempt by some Vith faction to find a path forward that doesn't end with mutual extinction? Chen's fingers danced across the controls, highlighting specific gene sequences. The colony on Meridian was researching xenobiological integration before the invasion. Cross-species communication protocols, peaceful coexistence frameworks, theoretical models for alliance building with hostile civilizations. My daughter was part of that team. The implications hit Reese like physical force. You think the Vith who left this egg were responding to that research? I think someone saw the work my daughter was doing and decided to answer. I think Arya is the first attempt at communication from a species we've only encountered through warfare. Chen's voice carried something Reese had never heard from an admiral before: hope, fragile and dangerous. And I think if we kill her now, we might be destroying the only chance we have at ending this war without glassing each other's homeworlds. Command won't see it that way. Command isn't here. I am. She turned to face him fully, authority radiating from every line of her posture. As of now, this operation falls under my direct jurisdiction. You and your crew are reassigned to Xenobiological Research Division, effective immediately. Arya remains in quarantine aboard this vessel, which will proceed to Deep Station Osiris for comprehensive study. All documentation is classified at Level 10, accessible only to personnel I personally authorize. And if she turns hostile? If this is all some elaborate infiltration strategy? Then we deal with it. But until we have proof of malicious intent, we proceed as if Arya is exactly what she appears to be, the first Vith in recorded history who doesn't want to kill us. Chen moved to Myra's chamber again. She saved my granddaughter's life, Captain. Not through violence or dominance, but through mutual need and trust. That matters. Maybe it's the only thing that matters anymore. Reese wanted to argue, to point out the 1,000 ways this could catastrophically backfire. But he looked at the sleeping child and the glowing creature in stasis and saw the same thing Chen did: possibility, terrible and terrifying, but real. What do we tell Mira? He asked. The truth. She's earned that. When she wakes, we explain what we're doing and why. We let her stay with Arya during the research process if she wants. She's our baseline for understanding their bond, our proof that interspecies trust is possible. Chen's expression softened infinitesimally. And maybe if we're very lucky, she reminds us that children see clearly what soldiers have forgotten. What's that, ma'am? That being different doesn't always mean being dangerous. That mercy can be strength instead of weakness. That the first step toward peace is choosing to believe it's possible. She left then, her boots ringing against the deck plates, issuing orders to her staff through encrypted channels. Rhys remained in the medical bay, watching Mira and Arya sleep in their separate chambers, separated by glass and species but connected by something that defied military logic. Shaw found him an hour later, carrying 2 cups of synthetic coffee that tasted like burned regret. Scuttlebutt says we're heroes or traitors, depending on which deck you ask. Probably both, Rhys admitted, accepting the coffee. Chen's backing us, but that doesn't mean this won't explode. Do you regret it? The decision? He thought about it, really considered the question. Ask me again when we're either court-martialed or given medals. Right now, I'm just trying to make it through the next crisis. Shaw smiled faintly. That's admirably honest, sir. Most officers would claim they knew they were right all along. Most officers didn't watch a 7-year-old child teach them about courage. They stood together in companionable silence, watching the viewports as stars streaked past. Somewhere ahead lay Deep Station Osiris, where Arya would be studied and tested and analyzed until they understood exactly what she represented. Somewhere behind them, the war continued its grinding advance, humans and Vyth locked in a cycle of violence that had already consumed too many worlds. But here, in this small medical bay aboard a ship now racing toward an uncertain future, 2 species slept peacefully side by side. It wasn't much. It probably wasn't enough. But it was, Rhys thought, at least a beginning. Deep Station Osiris existed at the edge of human-controlled space, a massive research facility built into a hollowed asteroid. It housed the Xenobiological Research Division's most sensitive projects, protected by military-grade weapons and enough secrecy to make conspiracy theorists weep with joy. Admiral Chen's shuttle docked in a private bay, its arrival noted only by the handful of personnel cleared for Level 10 operations. Mira woke during the transfer, disoriented and panicking until she saw Arya's stasis pod being moved carefully beside her gurney. She reached out instinctively, her small hand pressing against the transparent chamber, and Rhys saw the creature inside stir slightly, responding even in stasis to the child's presence. "Where are we?" Mira asked, her voice hoarse from sedation. "Somewhere safe," Chen said, appearing beside the gurney. She hadn't introduced herself yet, and Rhys saw the moment recognition flickered across Myra's face. "You look like Mom," the child whispered. "In the picture she kept. I'm your grandmother, Sarah. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me." Chen's voice carried decades of regret compressed into a single sentence. "But I'm here now, and I'm going to make sure you and Arya are protected. I promise you that." Mira studied her grandmother with the instinctive wariness of a child who'd learned trust was earned, not given. "Are you going to hurt her?" "No. We're going to study her, understand her, and hopefully prove to a lot of scared, angry people that she's not what they expect." Chin gestured to the facility spreading around them, all sterile corridors and reinforced observation chambers. "This is the best xenobiological research station in human space. If there's a way to help Arya thrive and demonstrate her potential for peace, we'll find it here." They moved through security checkpoints, each more stringent than the last, until they reached a specialized medical suite designed for unknown species. The room was large, divided into observation areas, medical equipment stations, and what looked like an environmental chamber that could simulate various atmospheric conditions. Technicians in biohazard suits worked efficiently, setting up monitoring equipment and calibrating sensors. Dr. Marcus Webb, the station's chief xenobiologist, approached them with the energetic nervousness of someone who'd spent more time with alien tissue samples than living specimens. He was young, maybe 35, with dark skin and eyes that darted constantly between data pads and equipment readouts. "Admiral Chen, I've reviewed the preliminary scans you transmitted. This is unprecedented. Truly unprecedented." He peered at the stasis pod containing Arya with barely contained excitement. "If the genetic modifications are as comprehensive as they appear, this represents the first confirmed case of Vyth biological engineering aimed at interspecies compatibility. The implications for Dr. Webb." Chen interrupted calmly. This is Mira Chen, my granddaughter, who has spent the past 40 days keeping Arya alive against considerable odds. You will speak to her with the same respect you'd show any colleague, and you will include her in all aspects of this research that don't pose safety risks. Is that clear? Webb blinked, seeming to notice Mira for the first time. Oh. Yes. Of course, Admiral. I apologize. Hello, Mira. I'm Marcus. I study aliens for a living, and I'm very excited to meet Arya properly. Myra's suspicion didn't fade, but she nodded slightly. She doesn't like loud noises. And she needs to be kept warm. And when she's scared, her glow goes dim, so you have to be patient until she calms down. Those are excellent observations, Webb said, genuinely impressed. That's exactly the kind of behavioral data we'll need. Would you be willing to help us understand her better? Only if I can stay with her. That's the plan. We'll set up a room for you adjacent to Arya's habitat chamber. You'll be able to see her whenever you want, and once we've confirmed she's stable, you can interact with her directly under supervised conditions. Webb gestured to the environmental chamber. We'll wake her slowly, monitor her responses, and build from there. Nothing rushed, nothing that would cause unnecessary stress. Reese watched the exchange, feeling slightly redundant. This was beyond his expertise now, beyond military protocols and combat readiness. Here, scientists and a 7-year-old child would determine whether humanity's understanding of its greatest enemy was catastrophically wrong. Chin pulled him aside while the technicians began the careful process of extracting Arya from stasis. Your official assignment is security oversight for this project. In practice, that means you're my insurance policy. If something goes wrong, if Arya demonstrates hostile intent or if external forces try to shut this down, you protect Mira and the research. Understood? And if Command sends someone to investigate? They will. I'm not naive enough to think I can keep this buried indefinitely. But I have enough political capital to buy time, and enough allies who understand that ending this war requires risks. She met his eyes steadily. This could change everything, Captain. The war, human-Vith relations, our entire understanding of what's possible between species. Or it could get us all killed. Either way, we see it through. You're betting a lot on a child's intuition and a herbivore who can't defend your reasoning yet. I'm betting on 40 days of survival proving that compassion isn't weakness. That Mira chose trust over fear even when everything told her not to. If a child alone in the dark can see past species hatred, maybe there's hope for the rest of us. Chen glanced at her granddaughter, who was explaining to Webb exactly how Arya liked to be held. Or maybe I'm an old woman desperate to believe my daughter's dream of peaceful coexistence wasn't completely impossible. Before Reese could respond, alarms shrieked through the facility. Red emergency lights flooded the corridors, and automated voices announced a priority alert. Chen's data pad lit up with urgent messages, her expression shifting from concern to grim recognition. We have incoming ships, she said flatly. Vice signatures, multiple vectors, heading directly for this station. Webb's face went pale. That's impossible. This location is classified. We're behind defensive lines. Apparently not classified enough. Chen was already moving, issuing orders to her calm. Battle stations. Activate all defensive systems. Get Arya and Mira into the reinforced medical bunker immediately. Reese grabbed Mira as technicians rushed to secure Arya's partially awakened form. The infant was stirring, her glow flickering erratically, her mandibles clicking in distress. Mira fought against his grip, reaching for her. She's scared. You're scaring her. I know, but we need to move. Now. He lifted her bodily, following Chun and Webb as they sprinted through corridors suddenly, filled with running personnel and weapons charging. The station shuddered as defensive cannons activated, engaging targets still kilometers away. They reached the bunker, a reinforced chamber deep in the asteroid's core, designed to withstand direct assault. Arya's environmental pod was sealed inside, the creature now fully conscious and emanating distress signals that made nearby equipment malfunction. Mara broke free from Reese and pressed against the pod's surface, her voice urgent. Arya, it's okay. I'm here. I'm right here. The alien's glow steadied slightly, focusing on the child's face. Her 4 eyes blinked in a pattern that seemed almost communicative, and her mandibles moved in ways that reminded Reese disturbingly of human speech attempts. Webb was scanning frantically, his instruments picking up something that made him freeze. Admiral. Arya isn't just distressed. She's transmitting some kind of complex signal, directed outward through the station's hull. Can you block it? Chen demanded. I don't think we should. Admiral, look at the pattern. This isn't a beacon or a distress call. It's structured communication. She's trying to talk to whatever's out there. The station shook harder as the Vythe ships closed range, their weapons carving through defensive layers. On the tactical displays, Reese could see the approaching vessels, smaller than typical Vythe warships but no less deadly. They moved with purpose, ignoring other targets to focus entirely on the research station. They're here for her, Chen said quietly. Somehow they tracked her, or detected her signals, or knew she'd be here. Or, Webb said, his voice shaking with a realization too large to fully grasp. She's calling them. And they're answering. Mara looked up from the pod, tears streaming down her face but her voice steady. She's not calling for help. She's telling them not to attack. She's trying to save us. The station's defensive fire reached a crescendo, then fell suddenly, silent. The tactical display showed the Vythe vessels holding position just outside weapons range, their formation spreading into a pattern that looked disturbingly ceremonial. And from the largest ship, a single small craft detached, moving slowly toward the station's diplomatic docking bay. No one breathed. No one moved. The universe hung suspended on a moment where everything known about the Vythe, about the war, about possible futures collapsed into a single, impossible question. What came next would determine if Arya's existence meant hope or extinction. If Myra's choice to save a dying alien would cascade into peace or disaster. If humans and Vythe could meet as something other than enemies for the first time in recorded history. The bunker's comm crackled. Admiral Chen, this is command deck. We're being hailed. Not attacked. Hailed. Standard diplomatic protocols. They're asking permission to board. Chen's hand moved to her sidearm, then stopped. She looked at Arya, glowing steadily now in her pod, the complex signals still emanating from her small form. She looked at Mira, whose faith had survived impossible darkness. And she looked at Reese with an expression that asked 1,000 questions but spoke only one command. Grant permission. Full security escort, but no aggressive positioning. If they're here to talk, we talk. If they're here to kill us, we die having tried. She moved to the bunker door, straightening her uniform, becoming in that moment not just an admiral but a representative of humanity's first real chance at communication with its deadliest enemy. Reese fell in beside her, weapon ready but pointed down, every sense alert for betrayal. And in the environmental pod, Arya pressed against the transparent wall, her 4 eyes fixed on the approach of ships that carried her people, while a human child whispered promises that everything would be all right. The door opened. The future waited beyond it, terrifying and impossible and real. The Vythe delegation consisted of 3 individuals, each standing nearly 8 feet tall, their chitinous plates a deep purple-black that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. But these weren't warriors. Reese recognized the differences immediately. Their mandibles were longer and more articulated, designed for complex communication rather than rending flesh. Their forelimbs showed signs of tool manipulation, the claws retracted into sheaths. And their eyes, all 4 per individual, tracked their surroundings with an intelligence that suggested analysis rather than threat assessment. They moved with deliberate slowness through the station's corridors, the security escort maintaining careful distance. Admiral Chen stood at the end of the diplomatic receiving hall, Reese and Shaw flanking her, weapons holstered but accessible. The moment felt impossibly fragile, as though a single wrong gesture could shatter into violence. The lead Vith stopped precisely 3 meters away, its head tilting in a motion that seemed almost deferential. When it spoke, the sound emerged as a series of clicks, whistles, and harmonic tones that human vocal cords couldn't reproduce. But the universal translator Webb had hastily configured caught the meaning, rendering it in flat, emotionless English. "I am Scholar Designate Kethras, speaking for the hidden chorus. We come seeking the lost song, the one who calls with changed voice. We mean no harm to this place or its people." Chen's response was measured, every word deliberate. "I am Admiral Sarah Chin, speaking for the Human Coalition. The individual you seek is here, under our protection. She is injured but recovering. Before we proceed, I need to understand your intentions." Kethras's mandibles moved in patterns the translator struggled to interpret, but the next words came clearer. "Understanding requires context. History. Truth that has been hidden from both our peoples for generations." The alien gestured to its companions, who remained motionless. "The war between humans and Vith is not what other species believes. The attackers you call Vith, the conquerors and destroyers, they are not all that we are. Explain." "We are fractured. Divided. The war chorus, the faction you have fought, believes in dominance through consumption, expansion through violence. They see all other species as resources to be harvested. But there is another way, another philosophy we call the hidden chorus. We seek coexistence, mutual understanding, survival through cooperation rather than conquest." Webb stepped forward despite Chen's warning gesture, his scientific curiosity overwhelming caution. "You're saying there's a civil war within the Vith species? That the attacks on human colonies are coming from only one faction? Not civil war. Deeper division. Philosophical schism that began before your species achieved spaceflight. The war chorus controls territory, resources, military force. They speak for Vith in all external contacts. The hidden chorus exists in shadows, conducting research they consider heresy, pursuing goals they deem weakness." Kethras's globe pulsed, a pattern that seemed to indicate distress. "We created Arya. Modified her biology, suppressed her aggression, enhanced her cognitive empathy. She was an experiment, an attempt to prove that Vith could evolve beyond violence. An attempt to make first contact with humanity through cooperation rather than conquest." "Why Meridian Outpost?" Chen demanded. "Why my daughter's research facility?" "Because your daughter, Scholar Designate Maya Chin, was the first human to broadcast communications suggesting the possibility of peaceful coexistence. Her transmissions reached us through channels the war chorus didn't monitor. We saw her research, understood her intent, and decided to respond with our own gesture of hope." Kethras moved slightly closer, its body language suggesting supplication. "We placed Arya's egg in the facility, hidden but accessible. We meant for your researchers to find her, to study her, to see that Vith could be different. But the war chorus discovered our actions before contact could be established. They attacked Meridian to destroy the experiment and eliminate witnesses." The implications crashed through Reese like a physical blow. The entire Meridian evacuation, the collapsed tunnels, Myra's parents' deaths, all of it stemmed from a peace initiative gone catastrophically wrong. Chen's voice went cold. "You're telling me my daughter died because you used her work without permission? Because your internal political maneuvering got caught?" "Yes." The translator rendered the word with simple, terrible clarity. "We caused death while attempting to prevent it. We failed your daughter, failed Arya, failed the possibility we were trying to create. There is no absolution for this. Only acknowledgement, and the hope that her death was not completely meaningless." Silence stretched, heavy with grief and anger, and the terrible weight of unintended consequences. Myra's voice cut through it, small but clear, transmitted from the medical bunker where she'd been watching the exchange. "Arya didn't fail. She lived. She found me, and I found her, and we survived together. Mom would have wanted that. She would have wanted us to try again." Kethras's attention shifted immediately toward the transmission source. "The child. The one who kept Arya alive." We detected their bond, the depth of trust required for such prolonged survival. She is the proof we needed, the evidence that our experiment was not inherently flawed, merely incomplete. You don't get to experiment on my granddaughter, Chen said, her voice carrying enough ice to freeze solar systems. Whatever happens next, Myra's safety and autonomy are non-negotiable. Agreed. We seek cooperation, not exploitation. The child proved what we only theorized, that humans and Vyth can recognize each other's sentience, can choose mutual survival over fear and violence. This is the foundation we needed. Webb was recording everything, his hands shaking slightly as he processed information that would rewrite xenobiological understanding. How many of you are there? How large is the hidden chorus? Large enough to matter. Small enough to be destroyed if we're discovered. We exist in research facilities the war chorus considers too mundane to monitor closely, in colony worlds deemed strategically unimportant, in vessels marked for decommission that we've secretly maintained. We number in the millions, perhaps tens of millions. But the war chorus numbers in billions. Then, why not just surrender? Shaw asked, her tactical mind already running scenarios. If you're so outnumbered, why risk everything on an experimental infant? Because surrender means extinction of everything we believe. Because the war chorus will never stop conquering until every possible resource is consumed or every enemy is destroyed. Because we've modeled the future, and it ends with both our species dead if the current trajectory continues. Kethra's glow intensified. Arya was not just an experiment. She was a message. A demonstration that Vyth can change, can evolve, can become allies instead of enemies. And now, with her survival and the child who protected her, we have proof. Chen was quiet for a long moment, weighing options and consequences. Finally, she straightened. If what you're saying is true, if there's a faction within the Vyth species genuinely seeking peace, then we need to verify this. Independently. With evidence that satisfies both our scientific community and our military leadership. What do you require? Full access to your research. Genetic records proving Arya's modifications were deliberate. Historical documentation of the hidden chorus's existence and activities. Testimony from multiple scholars willing to undergo verification protocols. And most importantly, a demonstration that you can be trusted not to betray us the moment strategic advantage shifts. These terms are acceptable. But we have requirements as well. Name them. Arya must be allowed to mature in an environment where she can develop her full potential. Not as a prisoner or specimen, but as a recognized individual with autonomy and rights. The child, Mira, should remain involved if she wishes, as their bond represents the proof both our species require. And when the time comes, when evidence is gathered and trust is established, you must help us reveal the hidden chorus to humanity's leadership. Must advocate for alliance against the war chorus before they finish consuming this sector of space. It was Reese who spoke next, his soldier's pragmatism cutting through the diplomatic language. You're asking us to join your civil war. To take sides in a conflict we barely understand. We're asking you to recognize that your war is already our war. That the enemy attacking human colonies is also our enemy. That cooperation benefits both our species while continued separation ensures mutual destruction. Kethra's gestured toward the medical bunker. The child understood this in the darkness. She saw past species to recognize shared need. We're asking adults to be as brave as she was. Chen looked to Reese, to Shaw, to Webb. Each nodded fractionally, understanding dawning in their expressions. This was larger than protocol or military hierarchy. This was the kind of moment where individual choices became historical inflection points. Bring your evidence, Chen said finally. Prove what you claim. If you can convince our experts that the hidden chorus is real and your intentions are genuine, then we'll take your case to Coalition Command. But if you're lying, if this is some elaborate infiltration strategy, understand that we'll destroy you and every Vyth ship within range before we let you threaten humanity. Understood. We would expect nothing less. Trust is earned through demonstration, not promises. Kethris turned to leave, then paused. Admiral Chin. Your daughter's work was not wasted. Her research, her hope for peaceful coexistence, it reached us across the dark, and changed everything. The hidden chorus exists because scholars like her believed different futures were possible. She is honored among us as one who spoke truth even when silence was safer. Chen's expression cracked slightly, grief and pride warring across her face. Then, help us finish what she started. Help us make sure Mira doesn't lose anyone else because peace seemed impossible. This is our intention. This is why we came. The Vythe delegation departed, escorted back to their vessel under heavy guard. The station gradually returned to normal operations, though normal had fundamentally shifted. In the medical bunker, Aria's environmental pod was being carefully prepared for long-term habitation, with Myra's quarters installed directly adjacent. Webb approached Reese as cleanup operations began. Captain, do you realize what just happened? We've made first contact with a previously unknown Vythe faction. We've discovered evidence of Vythe biological engineering for peaceful purposes. We've documented interspecies bonding that shouldn't be theoretically possible. This is career-defining. History-making? Or civilization-ending if they're lying. Reese countered. We're betting everything on the words of individuals whose species has killed billions of humans. Yes. But we're also betting on Myra's 40 days of survival. On Aria's herbivorous biology and non-aggressive behavior. On the fact that sometimes, when everything seems impossible, someone has to choose to believe anyway. Webb smiled slightly. That child taught us something important today. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust when every instinct screams not to. Reese thought about Myra's scream in the darkness, the moment that had started everything. About her desperate plea not to be left alone, not to watch something die that she could have saved. About a 7-year-old girl teaching hardened soldiers and admirals about courage. Yeah, he said quietly. I guess she did. In her quarters, Mira pressed her hand against Aria's pod, the alien responding with glowing patterns that seemed almost like language. Two species, separated by biology and history and a war that had consumed worlds, finding connection through a child's refusal to accept that different meant dangerous. Admiral Chin stood in her command center, composing the most difficult message of her career, one that would either change humanity's future or get her court-martialed for treason. She thought about her daughter Maya, about dreams of coexistence that had seemed naive until a child proved them possible. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the station, Vythe ships of the hidden chorus waited, hoping that 40 days of survival had planted seeds for peace that could grow into something strong enough to end a war. The message sent. The die cast. The future waiting, impossible and terrifying and real, built on a foundation of a child's tears and an alien's silent plea, do not leave me. Everything had changed. Now they would see if change meant hope or disaster. The story didn't end here. It began.